Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Gut Reset Summit. I'm your host, Dr. John Dempster, and today I'm joined by Evan Brand. And Evan Brand is a podcast host, a certified functional medicine practitioner, and a nutritional therapist. He became passionate about healing the chronic fatigue, obesity, and depression epidemics after solving his own IBS and depression issues. And he uses at-home lab testing and customized supplement programs to find and fix the root causes of a wide range of health symptoms. In his podcast, the Evan Brand podcast, he has over 22 million downloads and counting. And he's the author of Stress Solutions, REM Rehab, and the Everything Guide to Nootropics. So, Evan, great to have you on the Gut Reset Summit today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's great. Listen, I know you've got a great story. I want to hear all about it. We're going to talk about the connections between mold toxicity, dysbiosis, and the gut-brain axis. But tell us a bit about your journey with IBS. How did you get into this field in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, most of us are wounded warriors, right? We don't just decide, hey, I'm going to talk about parasites and gut infections. I had no idea what those were until I started running functional labs. I tried to do the whole nutrition as medicine, food as medicine thing and got rid of grains, went paleo. Mark Sisson, he was big back then. Mark's Daily Apple. I mean, we're talking 2009, 10, 11, 12. And I lost about 25 pounds without trying. I was really into bodybuilding at the time. I was pretty strong and beefed up, and I lost all this weight without trying. I didn't know what happened. I thought I had cancer or something. I was kind of paranoid about it. Luckily, I had some friends since I was podcasting back then in 2012 when I started the show, just interviewing naturopaths, functional medicine people, anybody I could get my hands on to try to just learn this. Because as you know, it's not being talked about in the mainstream. You're never going to see a commercial for a DNA stool test, I don't think, that looks for blasto or giardia. It's probably not going to be on the TV screen anytime soon. So I had to go. It felt more underground than even just a decade ago. It felt more underground to seek out these practitioners that were healing people with root cause medicine. And so through those interviews, I learned about functional testing, and I thought, okay, well, I need to pick up the ability to do this myself. So I took as many courses as I could take without having to be a naturopath or some other doctor. And then that opened the door up to organic acid testing and stool testing that was more advanced than what the gastro docs ran on me, because I had sought them out and their testing was garbage. They came up with nothing and wanted to put me on acid blockers. And I was like, nope, not taking them. Got into an argument with a gastroenterologist about, why do I feel better when I take extra acid and enzymes? She told me, no, that's going to damage your stomach. You're going to hurt yourself. You need to stop taking those. Since at that point, I realized it's not going to work. I found out I had H. pylori, super contagious bacteria. About 51% of the world population has it, very easily passed between couples and their children via saliva, kissing, sharing cups, sharing spoons. I had that. It damages the parietal cells in the gut, which then affect your ability to produce stomach acid. So now you've got this hypochlorhydria, low stomach acid state where your food ferments and putrefies. And then I see people get candida overgrowth, which I also had. And then I had giardia, which is a waterborne parasite I probably got from swimming in lakes and creeks and rivers, because that's what I loved to do as a kid. I was always in fresh water. Most fresh water has some level of contamination of giardia or possibly cryptosporidium. I also had crypto. So that explained my diarrhea. That explained my IBS. So as soon as I fixed the H. pylori, got rid of the giardia, got rid of the massive bacterial overgrowth too. I had Klebsiella and strep and many others. All of a sudden the IBS went away. So if people have gut issues, there could be 7 different flavors of how that manifests. Like you could sit 100 people in the room, they all have IBS, and there could be 100 different variations of toxins, pesticides, pharmaceutical side effects, candida, yeast, fungal, mold, etc. So I've tried to take my own suffering and then turn it into a more easy to digest protocol. And I help a lot of people with the gut. And then I got sick from mold. And then I realized, crap, all these people that are relapsing with their gut issues, they all have mold. So I went back and started testing people after I found out I had mold in a new construction home. I was waking up dizzy. My blood pressure was screwed up. I texted a friend of mine named Jack Wolfson. He's a cardiologist. I told him, Jack, I'm dizzy and my blood pressure's weird. What do I do? He texts back one word in all caps, mold. So that kind of opened up the whole new can of worms for mold. So now I was the gut guy for a long time, and now I'm becoming the mold guy because I'm realizing all the gut issues people, they have mold as well. And so that's kind of like my bread and butter now is helping people to improve their environment, get rid of colonization in the body, use antifungal herbs in the nose, antifungals in the gut, antimicrobials. So we do a lot of good work with that.
So tell us a bit about what mold is. We hear this word mycotoxins. What's the difference between molds and mycotoxins?
Yeah. So mold is what's going to grow on your drywall that gets wet. So, like in a new construction home, we've had in the attic because there was no garage, we had an air conditioning unit, and something happened with the condensation. Condensation dripped down from the attic down through the ceiling onto the drywall, and that paper backing on your drywall is a great food source for mold. So mold will stake out that territory. So if you take the mold aspergillus, it wants to claim that territory. It can't bite other molds, so it off gases these mycotoxins in an effort to kill other molds around it. And aspergillus can make ochratoxin, it can make gliotoxin, and several others we probably don't fully know. I think we're probably a little too cocky at this point with the testing. We think we've got it all figured out. But I bet you, just like on the stool test 5 years ago, there were significantly less markers we can test for. I think the same thing's going to happen with mold, where we're going to see, oh, wait a second, these molds have far more mycotoxins. Think of it as a mold fart that you're breathing in. You're the innocent bystander breathing in these mold farts in this battle between the molds. So zearalenone, it's a highly estrogenic mold that produces various mycotoxins. You have fusarium, and there's several others. You can test for maybe 5 to 10 different ones right now. There's two situations that can happen, and I think it's best to just show people a picture of it. This was a case study on a 3-year-old boy that I saw. He lived up in the Northeast, and his mom, he was one of 5 kids. He was 3 years old. His mother found out that the tree roots had busted through their foundation in their basement. So when it rained, they had water intrusion. And two things can happen with mold. So you can become colonized with it. So this boy here, he was off the charts. This organic acid called hydroxymethyl 2-feroic. This indicates he was actually growing aspergillus. So this is to help for visual learners, to show you the difference between mold and mycotoxins. So you can actually start to grow the mold. So you can see here, this poor guy, he had 3 different organic acids. This is a urine test you can do to measure this. When you're growing mold in your body, it'll spit off these acids into the urine. And so we can infer, if we find those acids, he's probably got mold. And then mycotoxins, the mold farts, you measure those in a different way. So like, for example, aspergillus, it'll produce aflatoxin, ochratoxin, gliotoxin. So when you're in the moldy daycare as a kid, the moldy school building as a teenager, the moldy college dorm, the moldy house that you buy when you're in your 20s, if you get your first house, the moldy apartment you're staying in those water damaged buildings that are growing aspergillus, you're breathing in these toxins. And so ochratoxin is probably the most common one you'll see, and it really affects the cerebellum. So me personally, this poor guy here, he's off the chart at a 33. Mine was a 196. I couldn't drive for about 2 years. I was in a constant state of dizziness. If I would come up to a stop sign after moving, I would have to recalibrate. It was like I was in a fishbowl, that water feeling kind of washing over your head. I had trouble walking at some points just due to the dizziness. Fortunately, I'm better now. I can drive, I can paddleboard and swim and skateboard and bike at high speeds in the mountains and mountain biking, and I'm good now. But this ochratoxin really, really wrecked me. And then gliotoxin, you'll see this a lot too. Candida produces gliotoxin, but the mold aspergillus also produces gliotoxin, and this will cause lots of issues with brain fog. So if you're seeing those people that are having like memory, any type of cognition issues, we're always suspecting this. And this is not a rare problem, by the way. This is probably, well, it's kind of hard for me to say, right? Because as you know, with your specialty, you're going to start attracting those people. So now I feel like I'm attracting the mold toxic people, but I'd say 8 or 9 out of every 10 I test now have elevated levels.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're showing those. These are labs that we run in our clinic as well, and they've been very powerful to really display where some of those root causes are. And that, as you as a functional medicine practitioner know, it's not about treating the label, it's about treating the person. And, we've got to really figure out what the root causes are. And molds are more and more becoming the biggest, I would say right now, one of the biggest hot topics in functional wellness.
Yeah, and people ask me, like, why is that? Like, why is that becoming more popular now? I think it's this kind of 5, 6, 7 different factors. Like social media has helped, because if you do a viral video on mold and you get it shared 300,000 times, all of a sudden everybody and their brother and sisters sending Instagram reels to each other like, hey, check out this mold talk. I think it's people are sicker. I mean, even 10 years ago, when I first started looking and running these labs, you would see people that had normal nutrient levels. Like you would see adequate levels of B vitamins, vitamin C would be okay, maybe on the lower end. Now, even people that are taking professional multis across the board, I'm seeing nutrient deficiencies like crazy. So I think the population as a whole, just in the last decade's gotten sicker. I'd like to know your thoughts on it too, because I know you've been in the game a long time.
Yeah, I've been working with patients like this for about 18 years. And you just brought up a really important point. When we see patients with high mold toxicity, with these endotoxins and mycotoxins that are affecting their gut lining, it affects their absorption of these nutrients. And so we're getting all sorts of connections between gut function and absorption of nutrients, which further exacerbates other problems. And that can be the gut-brain axis that we're going to talk about. It can be all sorts of chronic inflammatory conditions. If you don't have the nutrients to support the healing process, to support the detoxification process, that is ground zero. You've got to get that fixed. And so this is one of the questions I had for you today, Evan, is like, what is the connection that you're seeing directly with these mycotoxins and the actual gut microbiome?
Yeah, good question. And the easy answer is more infections. So, like if we run a GI map, which they've changed the reporting. So, if you're looking at a recent one you've done on yourself, it may look different, but we see a lot more Clostridia. We see a lot more E. coli. I see a lot more H. pylori. In this case, the little boy, he didn't have any. We'll see more overgrowth. So, it could be staph, it could be strep, could be Prevotella, which can be a trigger for RA. Proteus can be another autoimmune trigger. We'll see a lot more Klebsiella, which can be a trigger for Hashimoto's. So I think mold really opens the back door to allow all these other pathogens to thrive. Think about the name of them. They're opportunistic bacteria, and the opportunity arises for them to take over when your immune system is chronically suppressed or depressed due to the mold toxin. And then you'll see like this kid, he had a little bit of blasto. Let's see, we did another one too. Let's see how things change just for curiosity. So what'll happen is the candida often gets missed on the stool. So we'll find that on the oat test. But in this case, the candida was so bad that you could find it on a stool. So we'll see a lot of yeast overgrowth too. And if you go to a practitioner that just specializes in candida, they're probably not going to fully fix you, because they may just use, let's say, some enzymes. Like they're going to use biofilm busters, maybe caprylic acid, oregano oil, Paul Diarco, thyme, French tarragon, kind of these herbal antifungals. They can work great, but if you just fix the candida, you're gonna miss the rest. Like if they still have a water leak in their home, or the little boy sleeping in a basement that has water damage, you're going to spin your wheels, and you're going to spend a lot of money and time, and you're going to get frustrated, and eventually you're going to point the finger at your practitioner. And then you're going to bounce around from practitioner to practitioner. And then you'll be like the people who probably call you and I, which is, hey, I've been to 20 doctors. You're my last hope. You better fix me, because like you're it. And you'll look at what they've done, and oftentimes they haven't encompassed the whole thing because they specialize too much. So that's one like warning I would encourage people, is that when you do get exposed to mold, it really opens up 5 or 6 different categories of issues that you need to look into, because the mold and the mycotoxins affect the neurological symptoms. So you may go to your neurologist because you have numbness or tingling or dizziness or vertigo, right? That could be an ENT or a neurology appointment. They're likely not going to talk to you about mold. And because of your GI symptoms, you may end up with a gastroenterologist because of the diarrhea and the stomach pain, potentially even intestinal bleeding we've seen in high cases. So now the GI doctor is worried about putting you on biologic medication or antispasmodic medication for the diarrhea. Then you go to the psychiatrist because you have depression and anxiety. We know specifically ochratoxin depletes dopamine. If you just go to PubMed, you put in ochratoxin dopamine, tons of literature there on ochratoxin affecting the part of the brain that's making dopamine. So now you're at the psychiatrist because you have poor drive, poor motivation. You have anxiety issues. I think I see behind you on the bookshelf, you've got the Edge Effect book, which was one of my favorites that got me into neurotransmitters years ago. And I'd see all these people with low neurotransmitters, so we'd give them amino acids to fix it. But now I'm finding out that that was the natural Band-Aid, but really the root of the root was the mold. That's why they had low brain chemistry. So I'm trying to just illustrate that you'll get distracted by going to the over specialist. So let's role play a little longer. You go to the cardiologist now because you're like me and you have irregular blood pressure and you're having heart palpitations and you're laying in bed at night and your heart's beating out of your chest. The cardiologist may want to put you on a beta blocker just to try to calm down and mitigate those symptoms. And then the neurologist runs an MRI and doesn't find anything. So he says, I don't know why your numbness and tingling is there. Maybe you end up at a rheumatologist because you have joint pain, because mold can cause massive stiffness. Like my hands, just to make a fist, used to be pretty achy. Now, I've also personally dealt with Lyme and Bartonella and Babesia. So those co-infections that happened at the same time as my mold exposure, I think played into it. But if people really just close their eyes and picture all the different offices or all the different places they can end up for these symptoms, the ENT doctor for the sinus issues, the allergies. If you get rid of mold toxicity, your allergies calm down significantly because mold aggravates the mast cells. And if you have mast cell activation, that's huge. So I was suffering from that as well. I know this sounds messy and I'm throwing a lot at people, but what happens is when you have mold toxicity, this is a mast cell, type of white blood cell that's full of histamine and tryptase and other inflammatory cytokines. And these little green boogers would represent the degranulation process. And when you have mold, when you have gut infections, parasites, if you have Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia, those tend to, for lack of a better way to put it, put holes in these mast cells, which then leaks out more histamine. So if you've been told you need to go on a low histamine diet, or maybe you're on an H1, H2 blocker to try and calm these mast cells down, that can give you temporary relief. But if you're stuck on something like Claritin or Zyrtec or other pharmaceuticals like that, now you're down regulating your ability to make diamine oxidase, so DAO. And now you have more histamine intolerance. So you can't tolerate alcohol. You get drunk on one sip of a margarita. You have dark circles under the eyes. You react to every food. You feel like you're starving to death because you've got 5-6 foods left. You see how this thing gets messy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, listen, this is huge. I want to know a little bit more about where we're getting this mold. Of course, I think we can all envision the moldy wall, the moldy basement, the moldy bathroom, but we can also get mold from foods, correct?
Yeah, I think it's a small percentage, maybe 10% of the total burden. If we had a pie chart of exposure, I would say food is relatively small. Just if you compare the amount of times you're eating per day versus breathing. So average person's breathing, give or take 20,000 breaths per day versus you're eating what, maybe 3 to 5 times, or one if you're like crazy intermittent fasting. And it is true that grains can be moldy, coffee, chocolate. Most people that come to you and I are probably already eating cleaner than the average person. So I think they're probably eliminating a lot of the food sources anyway. It's a big problem in other countries, though, developing countries. If you look at India, if you look at Latin America, South America, and you look into PubMed, just reading about the grain reports, like corn tortillas, for example, highly, highly contaminated with mold toxin. So this unfortunately affects people in developing countries probably more than Americans, but I still think it's a factor. Would I be paranoid about the food? Probably not. I mean, I think everyone needs some level of binders and detox support just because every single person I test has either chemical exposure or heavy metals or mold. So I think everyone needs some kind of detox built into their life. But I would worry far more about the environment. And when people hear mold, it's controversial for several reasons because number one, it makes people feel like they're dirty. So if I say you have a moldy house, they get this image in their head like they're a loser who their grass is 2 feet tall. They've got a broken down lawnmower in the front yard. Their mailbox is falling over. They've got like cobwebs in their rooms. No, you can have a beautiful $3 million brand new house that's contaminated with mold and mycotoxins. And I've been in multi-million-dollar homes that are fully moldy, and I can smell it and I can feel it. I had a woman in Oregon. Her house was give or take $2.5 million. Husband and the wife loved it. She was sick as a dog. She also had breast implant illness, tons of mold in her house. We did the testing. Her husband didn't believe it. I'm like, how do you not believe it? The picture of the mold growing on the petri dish is right in front of you. And so she had to leave care because he was the one paying for the consults, paying for the labs. And he's like, nope, I don't believe in this. And who knows what happened to that woman. But mold does not mean you're dirty. And if you get sensitized to it, you'll see it and smell it everywhere. You go to the grocery store, you go to Whole Foods, I can smell it. Like if I go near the drinks, where they have all the kombuchas and the green juices and all that humidity, all that moisture that's sitting in those little cabinets all the time, those things get moldy easily. So I'm very selective about what buildings I go to.
Evan, what tests can people use besides the mycotox profile to understand if there's actually mold in their home? It's one thing to have it in our system, but are there some tests that you recommend that can detect it in the house?
Yeah, there's several companies out there that sell petri dishes, and these are cheap. I mean, you're talking $2, $3, $4 a piece to get these petri dishes. This is an example of one and how they look. So these petri dishes you can put out, and you put them out in various rooms of your home. So say master bedroom, kitchen, living room, basement, crawl space, attic. You put them out for an hour, you put the lid on, and then you seal them up and send them back to the lab for analysis. And they'll tell you what grows. So for example, this particular case, we want less than 4 would be optimal. So 4 colonies or less in a room would be best. So this laundry room that we're looking at, there was a 6 count of Alternaria, 3 cladosporium, 2 microsporum. So the total count of colonies wasn't 11. This would be a problem. We would want to try to mitigate this laundry room and get the numbers down. You can also pick up a lot of bacteria. So in this case, the family room, in this particular case, it was too numerous to count. Candida can also be picked up on the petri dishes. So if you have a candida overgrowth, or if you have a pet, maybe a dog that has candida overgrowth, they can literally off gas the candida spores into the air. You'll often find this in carpets, on couches. So sometimes we're literally having people clean their carpets as part of their treatment, because if the candida is in the carpet and they're stomping around, throwing all these candida spores up, they can get recolonized in their sinuses, drips down the throat, recolonizes the gut. So we'll often have people that have, let's say, big 100-pound dogs. We'll have them use a botanical shampoo for the pets and have them wash their dogs just to get the yeast problem under control for their fur. And then obviously try to talk to them. Like if you've got pets on a garbage diet, we're going to try to clean up the pet's diet too. We can give pet probiotics. We can give herbal antifungals to the pets too. Family members. I mean, it's hard to do this alone. So if you're a woman watching and you're 48 years old and you've got all these issues and your husband doesn't believe you and he's just going to eat pizza and ice cream and watch the game tonight, well, he's got to get on board too, because the chances of him reinfecting you with something are very likely. And I encourage people to do this together. It's really hard when someone's not on board, or if we tell you to go grain-free or gluten-free and your spouse doesn't want to, or your kids are still eating it, and you're making bread sandwiches every day and you're getting gluten exposure, which is aggravating your immune system. Like, it's really, if we can get the whole house under control, it's better.
Yeah, you take away that perfect storm analogy and start to dilute that down a bit, and you can start to treat those things. But if you're treating that mega hurricane of a storm, it's very hard. Tell us a little bit about this gut-brain axis. We hear all about this, and there's a massive connection between the gut and the brain. And in fact, I'll let you start to explain a little bit about that, but also how mycotoxins affect that gut-brain axis.
Well, you kind of alluded to mycotoxins creating intestinal permeability, which I suspect to be true because we always see that on the stool. I think the gut infections themselves, meaning parasites, bacteria, yeast, can do it, but it does appear, even in the absence of those infections, that mold will lower the gut barrier and increase the permeability. Then there's this link between mold toxin and the limbic system. So that includes the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain. I think of it as like your fear Rolodex, meaning, are you going to freak out at this threat, or have you already experienced this threat before, like a roller coaster, the drop, and I'm probably not going to die. I'm okay. Let me enjoy this. But it appears what happens is mold triggers the brain. So it's triggering the gut by increasing inflammation, but then also it appears to be connected to the brain in a way that now people develop chemical sensitivity. And I interviewed an amazing guy. His name is Ashok Gupta, and he sells and does what's called the Gupta or Gupta, Gupta program, which is like a brain retraining. So this guy was bedridden in his 20s, and he just literally like meditated his way out of his illness. And he figured out that viruses, infections, toxins, etc., stimulate the brain to be stuck in fight or flight, this sympathetic overdrive. And if you don't calm the brain down, it's really difficult to recover from chronic illness. And I had a friend, Dr. Margaret Christensen. She was an OBGYN who I believe she ended up closing her practice because she got so sick from mold. Her and I were talking for her mold summit that she did a few years ago. And I was talking about what I was doing. And she said, Evan, if you don't fix your brain and your nervous system, your limbic system specifically, you won't recover from this. And I kind of, had a rebuttal, and I was like, well, I'm doing this probiotic and I'm doing this binder and this adrenal and this liver support. She's like, yeah, it won't matter. And I kind of, I don't want to say I ignored it, but I was like, whatever. I'm going to figure this out. And she was right. I got stuck. And so the chemical sensitivity that I had developed from the mold exposure had created such severe issues where I would react to laundry detergent, dryer sheets, the aisle at the grocery store. I mean, I couldn't even get close. Gasoline fumes, perfume, cologne, deodorant. I mean, just any kind of VOC, any kind of odor, new car smell, vinyl, rubber, like any of it would trigger reactions for me. And it wasn't until I started doing like a guided meditation every night to try and reset my brain. I also did about 8 sessions of ketamine, IV ketamine, and that really almost completely turned off my chemical sensitivity. So I could go a million directions with it, but the long story short is that mold aggravates probably the microglial cells. I'm sure there's some neuroinflammation that you can measure in some way, but I just see that the chemical sensitivity, the anxiety, the depression, the suicidal thoughts, I mean, it can get really scary. Mold triggers a lot of that, and it can be reversed.
No question. And I want to hear what your protocol entails. Like, how do we get these mycotoxins out of the body once they're in?
Well, the cool thing is probiotics can actually help convert mold toxin into something less damaging. So I used to just focus on killing first. Like phase 1 would be, okay, we see the mold, we see the candida, we see parasites. Let's go ahead and do this broad spectrum. We may have wormwood, berberine, barberry, oregano, things to kill all these infections. And then maybe 3 months later, we would integrate the probiotics and kind of reseed the gut. Well, now I'm kind of doing all of it at the same time. So the protocol top to bottom usually looks like this: some sort of adrenal support, because usually there's massive fatigue, depression, anxiety, low libido, insomnia, inability to work, because some of these people are just so debilitated with the brain fog and fatigue. So usually there's some adrenal and or neurotransmitter support. So that can include things like tyrosine to help increase dopamine temporarily. So we can get those people feeling good enough. Because see, the problem is if you have a good protocol, but you can't get your people to be compliant with it, then you fail. Doesn't matter, how much they spend on it. Like if they can't stick with it, then they won't. And then you fail and you get the bad review and they blame it on you that you failed them. So what I try to do is work things into the protocol that I know will increase their mood. So I may use there's one product I like from Organic India called Joy. It's got Gotu Kola, Bacopa, Shank Pushpi. I mean, you just feel happy for no reason when you're taking that. So I'll have people do that. We'll increase like honeybush tea. There's a tea called Cup of Sunshine, which is a honeybush tea, and Kanna extract that also stabilizes the mast cells. So I have people sip on that, which will calm their histamine issues, but then they also feel euphoric. And when they feel good, they're more likely to stick to the protocol. So I'm always integrating that kind of mood boosting piece to it. I'll try to integrate some like pro libido herbs in there too. So we may throw in maca, we may throw in horny goatweed, just because usually the bedroom is dead in these mold cases because there's a blood flow issue. So either the man has erectile dysfunction or the woman has inadequate blood flow due to the impairment of nitric oxide because of mold. So now the woman, she can't get aroused. So she has no sex drive. That's an issue in the marriage, right? So now you're talking mold affecting your marriage. So we'll try to throw in pro libido herbs. Then it's the herbals. It's the antifungals up the nose, the antifungals in the gut. We talked about the probiotics, maybe some liver support, gallbladder support, things to help increase bile flow. And then it'll be binders. So it could be zeolite clay, charcoal, silica, pectin, fulvic acid. There's a few good blends on the market that work great. And we keep people on these for a year, 2 years, 3 years. If you talk to Dr. Neil Nathan, he wrote a great book called Toxic on Mold. And the book is Toxic but the story of it is mold and like environmental illness, chemical sensitivity. He pretty much says binders for life. So I still personally take binders. I got really messed up from all this in 2018. Here we are recording 5 years later, and I still take binders because it helps me. It helps my vision. I was in the shower the other day. I use Dr. Bronner's soap. I love that soap. On the bottle, it's really small font, just tiny little like hymns and verses from the Bible. I don't even know. It's just a wacky label. But anyway, I was looking maybe a week or two ago, and I was like, God, this font is small. I'm like, oh no, I'm getting old, like my eyes. So then I increased my binders a little bit more. I upped the tinctures I was taking for Lyme. And all of a sudden I was in the shower and I could read the small font again. I thought, oh, thank you, Lord, I can read. So there is an issue with vision too. We could throw that into the mix of you seeking practitioners. You go to, your optometrist or ophthalmologist for your failing vision. When you have biotoxins like mold or Lyme, it definitely affects the optic nerve and it affects your ability to see straight and clearly. So in those protocols, I may throw in eye support too, like bilberry extract and other things to help support the vision. Maybe digestive enzymes. So it ends up being maybe 6 to 8 different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you see any connections with biofilms at all with molds?
Yeah, I think it's a problem, but I feel like if you go too fast or you hit it too soon, you'll cause a massive herx in people and then they feel so bad they won't continue. So I kind of tiptoe into that. I really don't mess with the biofilm piece until I feel really confident that they're stable. If they're on rocky territory, they can't even take the full dose of the supplement I want them to. They're too sensitive. They still can't sleep. They're anxious all the time. They're having a lot of brain fog. I don't even go there. I just wait. Once I feel like they're in a good place for 3 to 6 months, then I'll say, hey, by the way, it's probably like a biofilm component to this. What do you think we try some enzymes? They try it. Usually at that point, it's well tolerated.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. For a lot of our mold patients, we've seen the levels come down as well when we do our IV infusions, so our vitamin infusions with glutathione and other things. But it definitely has to have that core program that you're discussing already.
Yeah, I love glutathione too. I'm starting to use less of it lately. Like I felt like for a while, you know how it is. You find like this one miracle nutrient, right? Like everybody needs it. So I was giving a lot of glutathione and NAC to people since NAC could help increase your natural production of it. And then I started to notice it was causing more flares in people. It's like I began to attract the more sensitive person. And so then I was noticing in these really sensitive people, the glutathione, it was probably just mobilizing too much mold too quickly.
Yeah.
And so if we cut down the dose, maybe they'd be okay. But now I'm getting people better without using it.
Great. Yeah, that's excellent. Now, give me a time frame. It can take years, as it sounds, to get fully healed. But how soon, with your protocol, are you seeing change?
Well, if you put in the fun stuff, like I'm talking about the libido support, the adrenals, the neurotransmitter support, as you know, neurotransmitters, you can improve those quickly. So I'd say within 6 weeks, you have people feeling more motivated, more focused, less anxious, less irritable. They have a better sense of humor. Maybe they can get to bed sooner and not have so much insomnia. So that could be a pretty quick turnaround, give or take a month, to really move the needle with your endocrine system, meaning the weight issues that you've had. You put on 40 pounds without trying, or you lost weight like me without trying, to really get the endocrine, the metabolic health back. I'd say maybe 6 months is realistic. So you could start to lose some weight or gain some weight, gain some muscle back. The cognitive issues, I would say, improve in maybe a month or two. Brain fog starts to clear up a little bit. Stool consistency, a lot of these people have bowel issues. So I think you can get the bowels under control in probably 3 months. Testosterone gets affected. So maybe 6 months to a year, you could do some good work with hormones, help regulate cortisol, estrogen metabolism. Because what happens is the mold creates the bacterial overgrowth, or I think allows it. And then the bacterial overgrowth screws up the glucuronidation pathway, which is one of the key ways you can get out mold. So we may use something like calcium D-glucarate. If that's in the protocol, then the hormones can improve faster. And then binders, like that part of it, to really get the mold out where you look clean on paper, I'd say maybe 2 years on average.
Amazing. Are you using any one particular diet to support this as well, or do you nuance that to each client and patient?
Yeah, I nuance it, but I mean, if you want to generalize, generally low histamine is going to work better for people. I didn't know that I had a histamine problem until I was sitting at the lunch table with my wife and she made some delicious guacamole and I ate it. And soon enough, I had massive head pressure. I'm like, why is it every time I'm doing avocado, I have high, head pressure? Well, it's high in histamines. Pineapple. I loved pineapple. Same thing, high histamine. Tomato, like a good salsa. Tomatoes and peppers going to be higher histamine. Leftovers, I'd cook a steak or maybe a pound or two of some grass-fed ground beef, and I'd have some left over. I'm in between clients. I could jump in and go eat some lunch and get back to work. And all of a sudden I'd start feeling the flushing hitting me. I'm like, this is a histamine flush. What is going on? Well, leftovers. Longer protein sits out, it accumulates more histamine. So the reason that the histamine bucket is already so full is likely because the mold has aggravated it, and then the bacteria in your gut can produce histamine. So if that bucket's already so full, it's not that the leftover ground beef is a problem. It's just that your bucket's so full you can't handle that exogenous histamine. As you get better, though, you can have more flexibility. Like I could eat pizza, I could do chicken wings with barbecue sauce on them, no problem. I'd be fine. I probably won't, but if I wanted to, I could get away with it now. And then I do caution people against doing raw vegetables. I generally like people to cook or steam or saute their veggies, because if you see this domino effect of mold creating or allowing candida problems, the candida elevates oxalates. And then if you're doing like a green smoothie every day and your oxalates are off the chart and you get kidney stones, that's not fun. So we will see oxalate problems a lot on the oat test. So we'll tell people, hey, look, like cut the green juice out for a little while. Let's focus on good meats, good protein, good fats. Let's stabilize your blood sugar. Let's get you off the blood sugar roller coaster. So let's pull some of this stuff out for a while.
Amazing. Evan, is there anything else you can tell us about molds and mycotoxins that we haven't touched on today?
If you have strange symptoms that no one can figure out, and the list could be growing all the time, 5, 10, 15, 20 symptoms. It could be the stuff I've already mentioned, the fatigue, anxiety, depression, low libido, low pleasure, low motivation, blurry vision, skin rashes, allergies, histamine problems, insomnia, erectile dysfunction, joint pain, back pain, headaches, migraines, dizziness, vertigo, blood pressure issues, heart palpitations. All that could literally just be mold. Assume that you're mold toxic until proven innocent, because at some point in your life, if you're 40, 50, 60, you've probably lived, worked, vacationed in a moldy building. And if genetically you don't detox that well, you very well could have had exposure from your childhood hanging out in your grandmother's moldy house like me, where you got exposed and you held on to this. And as you age and your hormones decline, for men, if you have less testosterone, you have less protection against the mold. So these symptoms start to crop up more. And females, if you have lower progesterone or you have estrogen dominance, these symptoms are going to become more prominent. So if you have this stuff, just spend some money and get some labs done, because the amount of time and money you're going to do doing this doctor runaround thing, just run the urine. It's easy. You don't even have to leave your house. Run the urine, get it back to the lab, see if you've got a mycotoxin problem, get an organic acids test done, see if you're colonized, see if you have candida, figure out where your brain chemistry is. That's going to save you so much suffering. And what we're talking about, you could run both of those labs for cheaper than the new iPhone. So instead of you waiting to order the new Apple Watch, the new iPhone, get your urine looked at and figure out where you are, so you can be the best spouse, the best athlete, the best lover, the best parent. I mean, that's what this is all about.
Evan, it's so true. I mean, you couldn't said it any better. When you test, you don't guess, get some answers, and then stop the, chasing every little symptom that is in front of you that day. But this has been tremendously informative. This has been fantastic. Where can people learn more about you online and find some solutions online?
Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity. It's been awesome. Evanbrand.com has everything. The podcast there, we'll get you on there too. Over 450, probably 500 episodes now. It's been on there for 11 years and counting. So I love doing that, interviewing people, sharing this stuff and getting it to the masses. So it's just called the Evan Brand Show. If you want to listen, obviously it's free on all the different podcast platforms. We interview all sorts of people about these topics. I have functional medicine training courses I've created where I've taken 2,000 plus case studies, distilled it all into educational format like you saw today. So if you're kind of a do-it-yourselfer, you could look at the courses, or if you're a practitioner, got about 20% practitioners in there. You can learn how to run these, read these, interpret these, make protocols to fix yourself or others. And then I do some one-on-one consults on a limited basis. So you could always book that at my site, evanbrand.com.
Evan, thanks so much. And thanks for everything that you do.
Thank you.